I speak 6 languages, said the proud girl. The billionaire laughs, but ends up in shock. Alexander Blackwood adjusted his $30,000 Patek Philippe watch as he stepped out of his Rolls-Royce Phantom outside the prestigious Manhattan Children's Academy, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble steps with the confidence of a man whose tech empire had made him one of the youngest billionaires in American history. Mr. Blackwood, called Principal Margaret Hayes, her voice carrying the practiced deference of someone who understood that his annual donations kept their elite private school operating at the highest levels of educational excellence. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak to our advanced linguistics class today. The children are absolutely thrilled to meet someone of your caliber. Alexander's smile was perfectly calculated for maximum charm and minimum genuine warmth as he replied, Mrs. Hayes, I'm always happy to inspire the next generation of global leaders, especially when they're receiving the kind of world-class education that money can provide. His reputation as a polyglot who conducted business in 12 languages had made him a sought-after speaker at international conferences, and he relished opportunities to demonstrate his intellectual superiority to audiences who couldn't possibly match his linguistic achievements. I understand you have some particularly gifted students in today's presentation, Alexander continued, his voice carrying the subtle arrogance of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in every room. I'm looking forward to testing their abilities against real-world business applications. What Alexander didn't expect was that his carefully constructed sense of intellectual dominance was about to be shattered by a 10-year-old girl whose abilities would challenge everything he thought he knew about language, intelligence, and the true meaning of being gifted. The classroom that Alexander entered represented everything his money could buy in terms of educational resources: state-of-the-art smartboards, imported furniture from Switzerland, and textbooks printed on paper so fine it felt like silk beneath students' fingers. 22 children sat in perfectly aligned desks, their uniforms pressed to military precision, their expressions reflecting the careful composure that elite institutions trained into their students from kindergarten onward. Students, announced Mrs. Hayes with ceremonial gravity, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Alexander Blackwood, founder and CEO of Quantum Technologies, who speaks 12 languages fluently and conducts business on every continent except Antarctica. The polite applause that followed carried undertones of boredom from children accustomed to impressive adult visitors who usually delivered variations of the same motivational speeches about hard work, determination, and the rewards of educational excellence. Alexander's opening remarks followed the predictable pattern: childhood struggles, breakthrough moments, the importance of global communication in modern business. Language is power, he declared with the authority of someone whose linguistic skills had generated billions in international deals. When you can speak to people in their native tongue, you can access their hearts, their minds, their wallets. I've closed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars simply because I could negotiate in Mandarin, Arabic, or Russian without requiring translators. The students nodded politely, but Alexander noticed one girl in the back row whose dark eyes seemed to be evaluating him with unusual intensity rather than passive admiration. The moment that would change everything came when Alexander opened the floor for questions, expecting the usual inquiries about business success, educational advice, or inspirational platitudes about following dreams and working hard. Mr. Blackwood, said the girl from the back row, her hand raised with quiet confidence, you mentioned that you speak 12 languages. I speak 6 languages fluently myself. Alexander's laugh was automatic and dismissive, the kind of patronizing chuckle that adults reserve for children whose adorable attempts at sophistication need gentle correction. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Alexander replied, his tone dripping with condescension that made several students shift uncomfortably in their seats. I'm sure you're very advanced for your age. Which languages do you think you speak? The emphasis on think carried just enough doubt to make clear that Alexander didn't believe a 10-year-old could possibly possess genuine linguistic abilities worthy of adult consideration. I don't think I speak them, Mr. Blackwood, the girl replied with crystalline clarity. I know I speak them. English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Arabic, and Swahili. Would you like me to demonstrate? Her voice carried no defensiveness or childish bravado, just the quiet confidence of someone stating an indisputable fact. Alexander's smile faltered slightly as something in her tone suggested this wasn't the naive boasting he had initially assumed, but he maintained his superior attitude. Well, let's see what you can do, little linguist. Why don't you tell us your name in a few of these languages? What happened next defied every assumption Alexander had made about childhood development, educational achievement, and the relationship between age and intellectual capability. My name is Zara Hassan, the girl began, her voice transforming as she switched seamlessly between languages with the fluidity of a seasoned diplomat. Je m'appelle Zara Hassan, et j'ai étudié les langues depuis que j'ai 4 ans. She continued in perfect French, her accent carrying the subtle refinements that only native speakers or exceptional students could achieve. Without pausing, she transitioned to Mandarin. 我叫 Sala Hafang, 我很高兴见到你，不来客户的先生. Her tonal precision flawless as she expressed pleasure at meeting him. The Arabic that followed was equally sophisticated, explaining that she spoke Arabic fluently because her grandmother was from Morocco. Finally, she concluded with Swahili, Jina langu ni Zara Hassan, ene ninajua lugha nyingi kwa sababu familia yangu ni kimataifa, describing her multilingual abilities as a product of her international family background. The classroom fell silent as Alexander processed what he had just witnessed, not the stumbling recitation of memorized phrases that he had expected, but the confident linguistic performance of someone who genuinely possessed advanced multilingual capabilities that rivaled his own expensive language training. Alexander's composure began to crack as he realized that this 10-year-old had just demonstrated language skills that surpassed many of his adult colleagues, speaking with a kind of cultural authenticity and grammatical precision that suggested native-level fluency rather than academic study. That's quite impressive, Alexander stammered, his usual commanding presence diminished by the unexpected encounter with genuine prodigy-level ability. How long have you been studying these languages? Zara's answer would prove even more shocking than her demonstration. I'm not studying them, Mr. Blackwood. I learned them naturally because my family speaks them at home. My mother is from Morocco, my father is from Kenya, my grandmother speaks Mandarin because she lived in Beijing for 20 years, and my great-aunt is from France. When you grow up hearing 6 languages every day, you don't really study them, you just absorb them like breathing. The casual way she described this extraordinary linguistic environment made Alexander realize that his own achievements, earned through expensive private tutors and intensive corporate training programs, paled in comparison to this child's effortless multilingual mastery. But surely, Alexander pressed, desperate to maintain some sense of superiority, you can't possibly understand complex business concepts or technical terminology in all these languages. That requires years of specialized training. Zara's response would shatter his assumptions completely. Would you like me to explain quantum computing principles in any of these languages? Or perhaps discuss international trade law? My parents are both professors, and we talk about everything at dinner. The demonstration that followed left Alexander speechless as Zara proceeded to deliver a sophisticated explanation of quantum entanglement in French, discuss blockchain technology in Mandarin, and analyze international monetary policy in Arabic with a kind of depth and nuance that his own business school education had barely achieved.
En physique quantique, Zara Began, l'intrication est un phénomène où 2 particules restent connectées même à grande distance.
Her explanation of quantum physics in French was so precise that Alexander, who had studied the subject for his technology business, found himself learning new aspects of the topic from a 10-year-old's multilingual analysis. When she switched to Mandarin to explain artificial intelligence algorithms, her technical vocabulary and conceptual understanding demonstrated mastery that exceeded what most graduate students achieved after years of study. 这个孩子到底是什么人? Alexander thought to himself in Mandarin, wondering who exactly this child was and how she had achieved such extraordinary intellectual development. The other students watched in fascination as their classmates systematically dismantled their guest speaker's assumptions about age, education, and intellectual capability through sheer demonstration of abilities that seemed to belong in graduate seminars rather than elementary classrooms. Mrs. Hayes stood frozen at the front of the room, equally amazed by Zara's performance and concerned about how her wealthy benefactor was handling this unexpected challenge to his expertise. The revelation of Zara's true background came when Alexander, his ego bruised but his curiosity genuinely aroused, asked about her family and educational background with the desperate hope of finding some explanation for abilities that seemed to transcend normal childhood development. Zara, Alexander said, his voice now carrying genuine respect rather than condescension, your linguistic and intellectual abilities are extraordinary. Can you tell us more about how you developed these skills at such a young age? Zara's answer revealed a world of intellectual privilege that made even Alexander's elite education seem limited by comparison. My mother, Dr. Amina Hassan, is a professor of comparative linguistics at Columbia University, and my father, Dr. Kwame Hassan, teaches international law at NYU. Our house is like a mini United Nations. We have family from 6 different countries, colleagues from universities around the world, and dinner conversations that switch between languages depending on what we are discussing. The casual way she described this extraordinarily stimulating intellectual environment made Alexander realize that true educational privilege wasn't about expensive schools or private tutors, but about being immersed in a family culture that treated multilingual intellectual discourse as normal daily life. Every Sunday, we have what my parents call International Discussion Day, Zara continued, where different family members present topics in their native languages, and everyone has to participate in whatever language feels most appropriate for the subject matter. Last week, my cousin from Beijing explained climate change in Mandarin, my aunt from Paris discussed European politics in French, and my uncle from Nairobi taught us about East African economic development in Swahili. The picture she painted was of a childhood spent in linguistic and intellectual richness that no amount of money could purchase, a family culture that created natural polyglots and critical thinkers through love, curiosity, and respect for diverse perspectives. Alexander's carefully constructed sense of intellectual superiority crumbled as he realized that his expensive education and corporate training had produced linguistic skills that were impressive by business standards but rudimentary compared to Zara's natural multilingual fluency and cultural authenticity. Zara, Alexander said, his voice now stripped of its earlier arrogance, when you speak these languages, do people assume you're a native speaker? Can you actually pass for someone from these different cultures? Her response revealed dimensions of linguistic mastery that went far beyond vocabulary and grammar to encompass cultural nuance and authentic communication that Alexander's business-focused language training had never attempted to achieve. Mr. Blackwood, when I speak Arabic with my Moroccan grandmother, she says I sound like I was born in Casablanca. When I speak Mandarin with my cousin in Beijing, people think I'm from northern China. When I speak Swahili in Kenya with my father's family, they joke that I'm more Kenyan than some people who were born there. The ease with which she described cultural code switching demonstrated an understanding of language as living culture rather than just communication tool, making Alexander realize that his own multilingual abilities, impressive as they were in corporate settings, represented a shallow mastery compared to her deep cultural fluency. But how do you keep all these languages separate in your mind? Alexander asked, genuinely curious about cognitive processes that seemed to operate on a completely different level from his own language learning experience. I don't keep them separate, Zara replied with a smile that suggested the question itself revealed limited understanding of how natural multilingualism actually worked. They're all part of how I think about the world. Sometimes I dream in French, sometimes I count in Arabic, sometimes I pray in Swahili. The languages live together in my mind like different colors in the same painting. The impact of Zara's demonstration began to ripple through Alexander's self-concept as he confronted the reality that his greatest source of pride, his linguistic abilities, had been surpassed by a 10-year-old whose casual multilingualism made his achievements seem like party tricks rather than genuine accomplishments. Students, Alexander said, addressing the entire class while struggling to maintain his composure, I came here today thinking I would teach you about the importance of language learning, but instead I'm learning from Zara about what true multilingual mastery looks like. His admission of being outperformed by a child sent whispers through the classroom as students realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, a wealthy, successful adult acknowledging intellectual defeat by one of their peers. Mrs. Hayes watched nervously as her star donor's carefully planned motivational presentation transformed into an impromptu lesson in humility that none of the educational consultants had prepared her to handle. Zara, Alexander continued, I have to ask, do your classmates realize how remarkable your abilities are? Do they understand that they're sitting next to someone whose linguistic skills exceed those of most professional interpreters? The question revealed Alexander's struggle to reconcile Zara's extraordinary capabilities with her status as an elementary school student, as if intellectual gifts of this magnitude should automatically elevate someone to special recognition or elevated social status. Zara's response demonstrated wisdom that went beyond her linguistic abilities. My friends know I speak different languages, but they also know I'm still just Zara who likes soccer and ice cream and gets nervous before math tests. Being good at languages doesn't make me better than anyone else. It just makes me different in one particular way. The philosophical implications of Zara's abilities began to challenge Alexander's fundamental assumptions about intelligence, education, and the relationship between talent and achievement in ways that forced him to reconsider everything he thought he understood about human potential. Zara, have you ever considered what you might want to do when you grow up? Alexander asked, his question reflecting his businessman's instinct to think about how exceptional abilities could be monetized or leveraged for career advancement. I want to be a translator for the United Nations, Zara replied without hesitation, but not just for business meetings or political negotiations. I want to help people from different cultures understand each other's stories, their dreams, their fears, all the things that get lost when we only translate words instead of meanings. Her vision of using linguistic abilities for genuine cross-cultural understanding rather than corporate profit made Alexander realize that his own multilingual skills had been employed primarily for financial gain rather than human connection or social benefit. "That's a beautiful goal," Alexander said, and for the first time in the conversation, his words carried genuine warmth rather than calculated charm. The world needs more people who can bridge cultural divides through authentic communication. As he spoke, Alexander began to understand that true linguistic mastery involved not just technical proficiency but emotional intelligence, cultural sensitivity, and genuine desire to serve human understanding, qualities that his business-focused language training had never emphasized or developed. The conversation took an even more profound turn when Alexander asked Zara about her perspective on language learning and cultural communication, hoping to understand how someone so young had developed such sophisticated insights about cross-cultural understanding. "Zara, what advice would you give to adults who are trying to learn new languages for their careers?" Alexander asked, genuinely seeking wisdom from someone whose approach to multilingualism had clearly been more successful than his own expensive but limited training. "Mr. Blackwood, I think most adults try to learn languages the way they learn business skills, like collecting tools to get things done," Zara replied with insight that struck at the heart of Alexander's own approach to linguistic development. "But languages aren't just tools. They're doorways into different ways of seeing and understanding the world. When my grandmother tells stories in Arabic, she's not just using different words. She's sharing a completely different way of thinking about family, time, relationships, spirituality. If you only learn the words without learning the heart behind them, you're just speaking English with foreign vocabulary." Her explanation revealed that Alexander's business-focused language learning had missed the most important dimension of linguistic mastery, the cultural consciousness and emotional intelligence that transformed mere communication into genuine understanding. "So how do you think someone like me could develop that deeper connection to the languages I speak?" Alexander asked, his question representing a fundamental shift from his earlier dismissive attitude to genuine respect for Zara's expertise. "You would need to stop thinking about languages as things you own and start thinking about them as communities you want to join," Zara replied. "Find families, neighborhoods, cultural centers where people actually live in those languages every day. Learn their jokes, their prayers, their lullabies, their ways of arguing and making up. Let the language change how you think, not just how you talk." The educational implications of Zara's abilities and insights began to challenge everything Alexander thought he understood about gifted education, intellectual development, and the role of family environment in creating exceptional human potential. "Mrs. Hayes," Alexander said, turning to the principal who had been watching this unprecedented interaction with growing fascination, "I have to ask, how does the school support students like Zara whose abilities clearly exceed typical grade-level expectations?" Mrs. Hayes's response revealed the limitations of even elite educational institutions when confronted with truly exceptional students. "To be honest, Mr. Blackwood, Zara presents challenges that our curriculum wasn't designed to address. Her linguistic abilities and cultural knowledge are so advanced that our foreign language teachers often learn from her rather than teaching her. We are still figuring out how to provide appropriate educational enrichment for someone whose capabilities in certain areas exceed those of our faculty." The admission that a prestigious private school couldn't adequately serve one of its most gifted students highlighted systemic problems in educational approaches that Alexander had never considered despite his significant donations to educational causes. "What would you need to better serve students like Zara?" Alexander asked, his question reflecting a genuine desire to understand how educational resources could be better aligned with exceptional student needs rather than standardized curriculum requirements. "We would need teachers who are themselves multilingual cultural experts, curriculum that allows for individualized advancement rather than age-based grouping, and partnerships with universities and cultural organizations that could provide appropriate intellectual challenges," Mrs. Hayes replied. "Essentially, we would need to reimagine education as a personalized journey rather than a standardized process, which is extremely difficult to implement within traditional institutional structures." The personal transformation that Alexander was experiencing became evident as he realized that his encounter with Zara had challenged not just his linguistic pride but his entire understanding of intelligence, achievement, and the sources of human excellence. "Zara," Alexander said, his voice now carrying humility that would have been unimaginable at the beginning of their conversation, "I want to apologize for my initial reaction to your abilities. I underestimated you because of your age, and that was both unfair and foolish." His apology represented more than just politeness. It reflected a fundamental shift in his worldview about the relationship between age, experience, and wisdom that would have lasting implications for how he approached both business and personal relationships. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Zara replied with grace that demonstrated emotional maturity to match her intellectual gifts, but I understand why you reacted that way. Most adults aren't used to meeting kids who can do things they thought only grown-ups could do. It's not really your fault, it's just how people usually think about children and abilities. Her generous response to his earlier condescension showed that her multilingual abilities were matched by emotional intelligence and interpersonal wisdom that many adults never develop despite decades of life experience. Zara, I'd like to ask you something that might sound strange, Alexander continued. But meeting you today has made me realize that I might have been thinking about language and intelligence in very limited ways. Would you be willing to teach me about how you approach multilingual thinking? I feel like I could learn more from you than you could learn from me. The request represented a complete reversal of their initial dynamic, with the successful billionaire acknowledging that genuine wisdom could come from unexpected sources and that intellectual humility was more valuable than ego protection. The conversation concluded with Alexander making an offer that surprised everyone in the classroom, including himself. Zara, I would like to establish a scholarship fund for students with exceptional multilingual abilities, and I'd like you to help me design it so that it actually serves students like yourself rather than just perpetuating traditional educational approaches that might not work for truly gifted language learners. His proposal reflected how profoundly the encounter had changed his understanding of educational philanthropy from simply funding existing institutions to creating new possibilities for exceptional students whose needs weren't being met by conventional programs. I would also like to invite you and your parents to have dinner with me so I can learn more about how families can create the kind of intellectual environment that produces abilities like yours, Alexander continued, his request demonstrating genuine curiosity about alternative approaches to child development that his wealth had never exposed him to. Mr. Blackwood, I would be happy to help with the scholarship program, Zara replied, but I think it should be for all kinds of language learners, not just the ones who seem gifted by traditional standards. Some of my best insights about language come from helping classmates who struggle with their Spanish homework or from talking with kids who speak languages I don't know yet. Everyone has something valuable to contribute to multilingual understanding. Her response revealed that her exceptional abilities were matched by inclusive values and democratic thinking that recognized diverse forms of intelligence and contribution, qualities that made her truly exceptional in ways that went far beyond linguistic talent. As Alexander prepared to leave the classroom, he realized that he had come to inspire students but instead had been profoundly changed by a 10-year-old whose abilities, wisdom, and character had challenged every assumption he held about intelligence, achievement, and the true meaning of being gifted in a multilingual, multicultural world. The dinner invitation that Alexander had extended to Zara's family led him to a modest Brooklyn brownstone that stood in stark contrast to his Manhattan penthouse, yet radiated an intellectual energy and cultural richness that his expensive interior designers had never been able to create with all their sophisticated taste and unlimited budgets. Mr. Blackwood, welcome to our home, said Dr. Amina Hassan, Zara's mother, greeting him in English before seamlessly switching to Arabic to instruct her daughter to help set the table, then transitioning to French to ask her husband about his day at NYU. The casual multilingual flow of household conversation created an atmosphere where linguistic diversity wasn't an academic achievement but simply the natural rhythm of family life. Please, call me Alex, Alexander replied, already feeling that his usual billionaire persona was inappropriate in this environment where intellectual curiosity and cultural authenticity seemed more valuable than financial success or social status. Dr. Kwame Hassan, Zara's father, emerged from his study carrying legal documents in what appeared to be 4 different languages, his greeting demonstrating the same effortless multilingual fluency that had made his daughter's abilities seem so natural. Alex, Zara has told us about your conversation at school today, Dr. Hassan said with a warm smile. She was quite impressed by your willingness to learn from her rather than just being threatened by her abilities. That shows wisdom that we don't always see from successful adults who encounter our daughter's gifts. The comment revealed that Zara's parents were accustomed to adult reactions ranging from disbelief to defensiveness when confronted with their daughter's exceptional capabilities, making Alexander's humility and genuine curiosity relatively unusual responses. The family dinner that followed provided Alexander with insights into how multilingual intellectual culture could be cultivated through daily practices that treated linguistic diversity and critical thinking as natural expressions of family love rather than academic achievements to be measured and rewarded. Zara, would you please ask Grandmother Hassan to tell us about her conversation with Professor Chen from Beijing University? Dr. Hassan requested in Arabic, prompting a discussion that flowed seamlessly between languages as different family members contributed perspectives based on their cultural backgrounds and professional expertise. Grandmother Hassan, speaking in Arabic-accented English, described a fascinating debate about Middle Eastern influences on modern Chinese poetry, while Zara translated cultural nuances that were difficult to express directly in English. In Arabic poetry, we have concepts about time and memory that don't exist in Western literature, Grandmother Hassan explained, and Professor Chen was curious about how these ideas might enrich Chinese poetic forms that are dealing with similar themes through completely different linguistic structures. Alexander listened in fascination as what would have been a simple family conversation in his own household became a multilingual seminar on comparative literature, cultural exchange, and intellectual collaboration that spanned continents and academic disciplines. Is every dinner conversation like this? Alexander asked, genuinely curious about how this family had created such extraordinary intellectual richness in their daily interactions. Not every conversation, Dr. Hassan laughed. Sometimes we just argue about soccer teams in whatever language gets us most excited about defending our positions. The revelation of how Zara's abilities had developed became clear as Alexander observed the family's approach to education, which treated learning as a collaborative adventure rather than individual achievement and emphasized understanding over memorization in ways that challenged conventional approaches to gifted education. Alex, said Dr. Hassan, we discovered early that Zara had an unusual capacity for language absorption, but we realized that her gifts would be wasted if we turned them into performance rather than tools for genuine understanding and connection. The family's philosophy emphasized using multilingual abilities to build bridges between cultures rather than to demonstrate intellectual superiority, an approach that had shaped Zara's character as much as her linguistic skills. When Zara was 5, she overheard an argument between her grandfather and uncle about Middle Eastern politics, and she surprised everyone by asking questions in both Arabic and English that helped them realize they were actually agreeing with each other but using different cultural frameworks to express similar ideas, Dr. Hassan recounted. That's when we understood that her language abilities weren't just about vocabulary and grammar, they were about helping people understand each other across cultural divides. The story revealed that Zara's exceptional linguistic gifts had been nurtured within a family context that emphasized empathy, cultural bridge building, and intellectual service rather than personal achievement or competitive advantage. Alexander began to understand that the Hassan family had created something that his wealth couldn't purchase, a learning environment where intellectual gifts were developed through love, service, and genuine commitment to human understanding rather than individual advancement or social recognition. The extended family network that had shaped Zara's development revealed itself to be a global community of scholars, artists, diplomats, and cultural workers whose multilingual abilities served humanitarian goals rather than purely professional or financial objectives. Zara's linguistic development has been influenced by family members and friends from many different countries and cultures, Dr. Hassan explained as he showed Alexander photographs from family gatherings that resembled mini United Nations sessions. Her cousin Fatima is a translator for Doctors Without Borders who uses Arabic and French to help medical teams communicate with refugee populations. Her uncle Omar teaches Swahili literature at the University of Dar es Salaam and helps preserve East African oral traditions. Her great-aunt Marie works with UNESCO to document endangered languages in West Africa. Each family member had contributed to Zara's linguistic education not through formal instruction but through stories, songs, cultural practices, and passionate discussions about their work and interests. We never set out to raise a polyglot, Dr. Hassan continued. We just created a family environment where different languages and cultures were valued equally, where intellectual curiosity was encouraged, and where learning was always connected to service and understanding rather than personal advantage. Alexander realized that Zara's extraordinary abilities were the natural result of being raised within a community that treated multilingual cultural competence as normal rather than exceptional, and that used intellectual gifts to strengthen human connections rather than create individual distinction or competitive advantage. The educational philosophy that had produced Zara's remarkable abilities became evident as her parents explained their approach to nurturing intellectual gifts while maintaining emotional balance and social responsibility that Alexander's own privileged upbringing had never emphasized. Alex, we've learned that truly gifted children need intellectual challenges that stretch their capabilities, but they also need to understand that their abilities are gifts meant to serve others rather than privileges that separate them from their communities, Dr. Hassan said as they watched Zara help her younger cousin with homework, switching effortlessly between languages to explain mathematical concepts that were challenging in any linguistic context. The biggest risk with exceptional children is that they become isolated by their abilities or develop arrogance that prevents them from learning from others who might be gifted in different ways. The Hassan family had addressed this challenge by emphasizing intellectual humility, cultural curiosity, and service orientation that kept Zara connected to diverse communities despite her exceptional capabilities. We encourage Zara to see her multilingual abilities as tools for helping others communicate and understand each other rather than as achievements that make her special or superior, Dr. Hassan continued. Every week, she volunteers at our local community center helping recent immigrants practice English, and she helps elderly community members communicate with their grandchildren who were born in America and don't speak their grandparents' native languages fluently. These service activities had taught Zara that linguistic abilities were valuable primarily for their capacity to bridge cultural divides and facilitate human understanding, rather than for personal recognition or competitive advantage. The long-term vision that Zara's parents held for their daughter's development revealed values and priorities that challenged Alexander's assumptions about success, achievement, and the purpose of exceptional human capabilities in contemporary society. We hope that Zara will use her abilities to contribute to international understanding and cultural cooperation, Dr. Hassan explained, but we also want her to understand that being gifted comes with responsibilities to help others develop their own potential rather than just advancing her own career or interests. The family's approach emphasized character development alongside intellectual growth, ensuring that Zara's exceptional abilities would be guided by wisdom, compassion, and commitment to human welfare rather than personal ambition or material success. Alex, we've noticed that many highly capable adults become focused on accumulating wealth, status, or recognition rather than using their gifts to address the world's most pressing problems. Dr. Hassan continued with gentle directness that made Alexander reflect on his own priorities and motivations. We want Zara to understand that her linguistic abilities could help resolve international conflicts, facilitate cross-cultural collaboration on global challenges, or preserve endangered languages and cultures that are disappearing due to globalization and cultural homogenization. The vision they painted was of intellectual gifts being used for humanitarian purposes rather than individual advancement, a perspective that made Alexander question whether his own considerable abilities had been directed towards sufficiently meaningful goals. As the evening concluded, Alexander realized that he had encountered not just an exceptionally gifted child but a family whose approach to nurturing human potential offered profound lessons about education, values, and the responsible use of exceptional abilities that could transform how he thought about success, achievement, and the purpose of human excellence in an interconnected world. The encounter with Zara and her family triggered a fundamental transformation in Alexander's approach to his technology empire, as he began to recognize that his company's global expansion efforts had been hampered by the same shallow understanding of multilingual communication that had embarrassed him in Zara's classroom. Sarah, Alexander said to his chief technology officer during their next executive meeting, I want you to conduct a comprehensive audit of our international communication strategies and cultural competency across all our global offices. His request puzzled the leadership team, who had always assumed that Alexander's personal multilingual abilities ensured effective cross-cultural business operations. Alex, what's prompted this sudden interest in communication analysis? Asked Dr. Sarah Chen, genuinely curious about the shift in priorities that seemed to have emerged overnight. I recently learned that there's a significant difference between speaking languages for business purposes and truly understanding the cultural contexts that give those languages meaning, Alexander replied, his explanation reflecting insights he had gained from his conversation with Zara. We may be losing opportunities, misunderstanding partners, or failing to connect with international markets because our approach to multilingual communication is too superficial. The revelation that his company might be suffering from the same linguistic limitations he had discovered in himself sent shockwaves through an executive team that had always prided themselves on sophisticated global business strategies and cutting-edge international operations. The cultural audit that Alexander commissioned revealed systematic problems in quantum technology's international operations that reflected exactly the kind of shallow multilingual approach that Zara had helped him recognize in his own business communications. Alex, reported Dr. Martinez, the consulting anthropologist he had hired to evaluate their cross-cultural effectiveness, your company's international communications are technically correct but culturally tone-deaf in ways that are probably costing you significant business opportunities and partnership potential. The detailed analysis showed that while quantum technologies employed translators and interpreters for their global operations, they had failed to understand the cultural nuances, relationship-building practices, and communication styles that were essential for successful business in different cultural contexts. For example, Dr. Martinez continued, your negotiations in Japan have been failing not because of language barriers, but because your team doesn't understand the cultural importance of consensus building, face-saving, and indirect communication styles that are essential for business relationships in Japanese culture. Similar problems had emerged in their Middle Eastern, African, and Latin American operations, where technical linguistic competence had been undermined by cultural insensitivity and failure to understand local business practices, relationship patterns, and communication preferences. Alexander realized that his personal linguistic abilities, impressive as they were in academic or technical contexts, had never developed the cultural depth and authentic understanding that Zara had demonstrated so effortlessly in their classroom conversation. The solution that Alexander developed drew directly on insights he had gained from observing the Hassan family's approach to multilingual cultural competence, leading him to establish the most innovative international business development program in the technology industry. I want to create a cultural intelligence division that goes far beyond traditional language training to develop genuine multicultural competence among our international business teams, Alexander announced to his board of directors, his proposal reflecting a completely new approach to global business development. We are going to partner with universities, cultural organizations, and immigrant communities to create immersive cultural learning experiences that help our employees develop the kind of authentic cross-cultural understanding that actually facilitates successful international business relationships. The program that emerged included extended cultural immersion experiences, partnerships with multicultural families like the Hassans, and mentorship relationships with immigrants and international students who could provide authentic insights into the cultural contexts that shaped different business environments. Alex, this is going to be extremely expensive and time-consuming compared to traditional language training programs, warned CFO Michael Torres, concerned about the financial implications of such comprehensive cultural education initiatives. Michael, Zara Hassan taught me that authentic multilingual competence can't be purchased through traditional training programs, Alexander replied. If we want to build genuine relationships with international partners and customers, we need to invest in the kind of deep cultural understanding that takes time, humility, and authentic engagement with different communities. The implementation of Alexander's Cultural Intelligence Division created unprecedented opportunities for collaboration between his technology company and academic institutions, cultural organizations, and immigrant communities that had previously been overlooked as business partners or knowledge resources. We are not just training employees to speak different languages, explained Dr. Jennifer Park, the Korean-American anthropologist Alexander recruited to direct the new division. We are helping them develop cultural empathy, relationship-building skills, and authentic understanding of different worldviews that can transform how international business gets conducted. The program included partnerships with families like the Hassans, who opened their homes to quantum technologies employees seeking to understand how multilingual cultural competence actually developed through daily practice and authentic relationships. Zara herself became an informal consultant to the program, helping adult employees understand how different languages could shape thinking patterns and cultural perspectives in ways that had immediate implications for business communication and partnership development. When Mr. Alexander's employees come to our house for dinner, Zara told her school friends, they're always surprised by how differently we think about time, relationships, and problem-solving when we are speaking Arabic compared to English or French. It's like each language unlocks different parts of our brains and different ways of understanding the same situations. Her observations provided valuable insights for business professionals who were learning that effective international communication required more than linguistic translation. It required cultural translation that could only be developed through authentic relationships and immersive experiences. The global impact of Alexander's Cultural Intelligence Initiative began to transform quantum technology's international business results in ways that validated Zara's insights about the difference between linguistic performance and authentic cultural understanding. Alex, our partnership negotiations in Morocco have been incredibly successful since our team completed cultural immersion training with Dr. Hassan's extended family, reported International Business Director Lisa Kim during a quarterly review meeting. Instead of just presenting our technology solutions in Arabic, our representatives now understand the cultural importance of relationship building, family connections, and long-term trust that are essential for successful business partnerships in North African markets. The transformation extended beyond individual deals to encompass fundamental shifts in how the company approached international expansion, moving from aggressive market penetration strategies to collaborative partnership models that honored local cultures and business practices. Similar success stories emerged from their operations in Kenya, where Swahili-speaking team members who had studied with Dr. Hassan's East African colleagues were building educational technology partnerships that served local community needs rather than just expanding market share. The most remarkable change, observed Dr. Park during her 6-month program evaluation, is that our employees are no longer just representing quantum technologies in international markets. They're becoming genuine cultural bridges who understand that successful business requires authentic human connections rather than just efficient transactions. The educational implications of Alexander's transformation began to extend beyond his corporate initiatives as he established scholarship programs and educational partnerships that reflected the insights he had gained from Zara and her family about how authentic multilingual competence could be developed and applied. I want to create opportunities for other children like Zara to develop their linguistic and cultural gifts in ways that prepare them for meaningful contributions to international understanding and cooperation, Alexander explained during his announcement of the Hassan Blackwood Foundation for Multilingual Education, named to honor both families' contributions to his evolving understanding of cultural competence and global citizenship. The foundation provided scholarships, mentorship programs, and cultural exchange opportunities specifically designed for students whose multilingual abilities could be developed for diplomatic, humanitarian, or cultural bridge-building purposes rather than just academic or professional advancement. Zara herself became the foundation's youngest board advisor, helping to ensure that programs remain focused on authentic cultural understanding and service orientation rather than competitive achievement or individual recognition. I want kids who speak multiple languages to understand that their abilities are gifts meant to help people from different cultures understand each other better, Zara explained during her first foundation board meeting, not just tools for getting better jobs or making more money. Her perspective continued to shape Alexander's approach to philanthropy and business in ways that emphasized human connection and cultural understanding over financial returns and competitive advantage. The personal transformation that Alexander experienced through his encounter with Zara culminated in fundamental changes to his lifestyle, relationships, and understanding of what constituted meaningful success in an increasingly interconnected global society. I've realized that all my linguistic abilities and international business experience were just surface-level achievements compared to the kind of authentic cultural competence that Zara and her family demonstrated, Alexander reflected during an interview with Harvard Business Review about his company's innovative approach to global business development. Meeting a 10-year-old who could outperform me linguistically while also demonstrating greater cultural wisdom and emotional intelligence forced me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about intelligence, achievement, and the purpose of exceptional human capabilities. The changes in his personal life were equally dramatic, as Alexander began studying with immigrant families in New York, volunteering with international student organizations, and dedicating significant time to developing the kind of authentic cultural relationships that he had previously treated as business networking opportunities. His penthouse apartment, once a sterile showcase of expensive international art and furniture, was transformed into a gathering place for cultural exchange dinners, language practice sessions, and community-building activities that brought together people from diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds. Zara taught me that being truly multilingual means becoming multicultural, Alexander told friends who were amazed by the changes in his priorities and lifestyle, and being multicultural means understanding that your own perspective is just one small part of a much larger human story that includes wisdom, beauty, and insights from every culture on Earth. The billionaire who had once used his linguistic abilities primarily for competitive business advantage had become an advocate for cultural understanding and international cooperation, proving that genuine encounters with exceptional human beings could transform even the most successful individuals in ways that transcended financial achievement and social recognition. The ripple effects of Zara's influence on Alexander's worldview extended far beyond corporate transformation, as he began using his wealth and connections to create opportunities for young multilingual talents to pursue meaningful careers in international diplomacy and cultural bridge building. Zara, I've been thinking about your dream of becoming a UN translator, Alexander said during one of his regular visits to the Hassan family home, and I'd like to help make that possible not just for you, but for other young people who share your vision of using language skills to serve human understanding rather than just personal advancement. His proposal involved establishing internship programs, mentorship opportunities, and educational partnerships with the United Nations that would give exceptional young linguists like Zara early exposure to international diplomacy and cross-cultural communication at the highest levels. Mr. Alexander, that sounds amazing, but I want to make sure that any program we create helps all kinds of language learners, not just the ones who seem gifted by traditional standards, Zara replied, her response reflecting the inclusive values that had impressed Alexander from their first meeting. Some of the most important translation work happens in refugee camps, community centers, and hospitals where people need help communicating about basic needs and urgent problems. Those translators might not speak 6 languages perfectly, but they understand how to help people connect when understanding means survival. Her perspective ensured that Alexander's UN partnership programs would serve diverse communities rather than just creating elite pathways for already privileged students. The United Nations Youth Translation Program that emerged from Alexander's collaboration with Zara became a model for how exceptional young talents could be nurtured while maintaining connection to communities and commitment to service rather than individual achievement. We are not just training future UN translators, explained Dr. Sarah Martinez, the program director whom Alexander recruited from Columbia University School of International Affairs. We are developing young cultural ambassadors who understand that translation work is fundamentally about helping people from different backgrounds understand each other's humanity, rather than just converting words from one language to another. The program included mentorship with experienced UN translators, cultural immersion experiences in different countries, and service projects in immigrant and refugee communities that gave young participants practical experience using their linguistic abilities to address real human needs. Zara's involvement as a peer mentor and program advisor helped ensure that participants maintained focus on humanitarian service rather than career advancement, while her multilingual family provided authentic cultural education that prepared young translators for the complex cultural navigation required in international diplomacy. When I work with other kids in the program, Zara told Alexander during a program evaluation meeting, I try to help them understand that being a good translator means learning to see the world through many different sets of eyes, not just being able to switch between languages quickly. The global recognition that Zara began receiving as a result of her involvement in Alexander's UN program created opportunities for her to influence international approaches to language education and cultural competency training in ways that extended far beyond individual career development. Zara, the UN Educational Committee has invited you to present your perspective on multilingual education at their annual conference in Geneva, Alexander told her, his voice reflecting pride in her growing influence on international educational policy. They're particularly interested in your insights about how authentic cultural competence develops through family and community relationships, rather than just academic instruction. Her presentation to international educators and policymakers challenged conventional approaches to language learning that emphasized individual achievement over cultural understanding and competitive testing over authentic communication skills. When adults ask me how I learned to speak 6 languages, Zara told the assembled delegates, they usually want to know about study methods or practice schedules. But that's not really how it happened. I learned languages because I wanted to understand the people I love, because I was curious about their stories and their ways of seeing the world, because using their languages helped me feel closer to them and more connected to their cultures. Her explanation of language learning as relationship building rather than skill acquisition influenced UNESCO guidelines for multilingual education and inspired pilot programs in schools around the world that emphasize cultural exchange and authentic communication over standardized testing and competitive achievement. The diplomatic impact of Zara's approach to translation work became evident as her involvement in Alexander's UN program led to innovative approaches to international communication that prioritized mutual understanding over technical accuracy. Zara has shown us that effective translation in diplomatic contexts requires more than linguistic precision, observed Dr. Jennifer Park, who had transitioned from Alexander's Corporate Cultural Intelligence Division to work on UN communication protocols. She understands how to translate not just words but cultural concepts, emotional nuances, and relationship dynamics that are often more important than literal accuracy for achieving genuine understanding between different cultural groups. Zara's work with refugee families had taught her that successful translation often meant helping people find common ground and shared humanity, rather than just converting statements from one language to another. Sometimes when people from different cultures are trying to communicate, Zara explained to UN training seminars, they're using words that seem to mean opposite things, but if you listen carefully to their hearts and their intentions, you realize they're actually trying to express similar feelings or concerns. A good translator helps them recognize those connections rather than just focusing on the differences. Her approach influenced UN communication protocols and training programs for international diplomats who were learning that cultural translation was often more important than linguistic translation for achieving successful international cooperation. The educational legacy that Zara was creating through her collaboration with Alexander began to transform approaches to gifted education and multilingual development in schools around the world that were adopting the Hassan family model of community-based cultural learning. What Zara and her family have shown us, explained Dr. Michael Rodriguez, an educational researcher who studied the program's impact, is that exceptional multilingual abilities develop best within communities that treat linguistic diversity as normal rather than special, and that use language skills for service and connection rather than competition and individual advancement. Schools began establishing cultural exchange programs, family mentorship networks, and community service projects that gave students opportunities to develop authentic multilingual competence through relationships and practical application rather than just classroom instruction and standardized testing. The Zara Hassan Centers for Multilingual Community Learning, funded by Alexander's Foundation and guided by principles that Zara had articulated through her work with the UN program, became models for how educational institutions could nurture linguistic gifts while maintaining focus on character development and social responsibility. I hope that kids who go through programs like this will understand that being able to speak different languages is a gift that's meant to be shared, Zara told educators who came to study the program model, and that the most important thing about learning languages is learning to love the people who speak them and want to understand their stories, their dreams, and their ways of making the world a better place. The international recognition of Zara's contributions to multilingual education and cultural diplomacy culminated in her selection as the youngest ever recipient of the UN Youth Ambassador Award for Cross-Cultural Understanding, an honor that reflected both her exceptional abilities and her commitment to using those abilities for humanitarian service. Zara Hassan represents the future of international cooperation, declared UN Secretary-General during the award ceremony, because she understands that real diplomacy happens not just in conference rooms and official meetings, but in the daily interactions between people from different cultures who are willing to listen to each other with open hearts and minds. Her acceptance speech, delivered in 6 languages that represented different regions of the world, emphasized themes that had guided her development since childhood: the importance of linguistic humility, cultural curiosity, and service orientation that treated multilingual abilities as tools for building human connections rather than displaying personal achievements. "When I was little," Zara told the international audience, "my grandmother used to say that languages are bridges that help people walk into each other's hearts. Today I want to challenge all of us, children and adults, students and teachers, diplomats and citizens, to use whatever languages we speak as bridges for understanding, compassion, and cooperation that can help our world become more peaceful, more just, and more connected." Alexander, watching from the audience as the 10-year-old girl who had transformed his understanding of intelligence and achievement addressed world leaders with wisdom that surpassed many experienced diplomats, realized that his greatest success hadn't been building a technology empire or accumulating wealth, but recognizing exceptional human potential and helping to nurture it for the benefit of global human understanding. The billionaire who had once measured success through financial metrics and competitive achievements had discovered that true fulfillment came from contributing to the development of remarkable individuals whose gifts could serve the entire human family.